textbooks describe the 19th century as an era of unprecedented technological progress and romanticism, yet shamefully omit that it was a century of total incessant global slaughter? We are told that these were desperate conflicts. We are told that Britain fought for colonies, the United States of America dealt, and China suffered from the Opium Wars. But what if I told you that all of this is a blatant lie? What if no such disunity existed? Look at a map of conflicts from 1830 to 1870. These are not local skirmishes. This was a single, synchronized global military operation. This was the First World War, which historians deliberately fragmented into dozens of minor names to conceal the main enemy. Who were the united armies of the New World Order truly fighting against? Who was being purged with bayonets and grape shot from America to China, from Crimea to Paraguay? The answer to this question will overturn your perception of reality. We're talking about the asymmetrical wars of the 19th century. Wars where one side possessed resources, logistics, and perhaps technologies incomprehensible to the average person of that era, while the other side, that was us, or those who lived here before us. Let's start with the dry language of facts, which academic historians so dislike. Open any list of wars from the mid-9th century. Just look at the dates. 1848, the spring of nations in Europe. Revolutions erupt everywhere simultaneously, as if on cue from an invisible conductor. 1853, the Crimean War. 1857, the Sepoy Mutiny in India. 1861, the Civil War in the United States of America. 1864, the Paraguayan War. 1850, the beginning of the Taiping Rebellion in China. Doesn't it seem strange to you that the entire world ignited in a single decade? Official science will give you 100 different reasons: economy, religion, the struggle for independence. But let's apply logic. When a fire starts simultaneously in the living room, the attic, and the basement, you don't think these are random ignitions from faulty wiring, do you? You understand that the house is being set on fire. In the 19th century, our common home was deliberately set on fire. And the most terrible, the bloodiest page of this cleansing was the so-called Taiping Rebellion in China. Historians dryly record the numbers, 20, 30, and according to some sources, up to 100 million dead. Ponder these words, 100 million people. That is more than the population of many modern countries. We are told that this was a civil war caused by a religious fanatic. Seriously? Peasants with hoes killed 100 million people? Such a scale of genocide requires an industrial machine of destruction. It requires artillery, logistics, resources that the rebels simply could not have possessed. If we look at photographs and engravings of ruined Chinese cities from that time, we will see not traces of fires, but ruins reminiscent of the aftermath of 20th century carpet bombings. Stone buildings were pulverized. Who possessed such power in the mid-19th century? And most importantly, who was being destroyed there? There is a theory that China at that time was not at all a backward agrarian country, but one of the last strongholds of an old civilization. That very Tartary or Great Asia, which preserved remnants of ancient technologies and knowledge. The Taiping Rebellion was a cover operation. Under the guise of suppressing a revolt, Western powers, together with the Manchu dynasty, annihilated the indigenous population that remembered true history and possessed skills dangerous to the new masters of the world. Now let's move to the other side of the world, the United States of America, the Civil War between the North and the South. We were instilled from childhood that this was a war for the liberation of slaves, the noble North against the slave-owning South. But let's look at photographs of the ruined cities of the South. Richmond, Atlanta, Charleston. Look at these images carefully. You see brick shells without roofs, scorched neighborhoods, protruding skeletons of buildings. This does not resemble the result of field artillery actions of those years. Cannonballs of that era left holes in walls. They did not raze entire neighborhoods to their foundations. The nature of the destruction surprisingly resembles Dresden or Hiroshima. What if the Civil War in America was not civil at all? What if the Northern Army was performing the function of cleansing a territory where city-states, part of the Old World's global system, were located. The South was agrarian and wealthy. Its architecture was ancient, majestic, impossible to have been built by colonists arriving in wagons. These cities had to be destroyed to erase the memory of who truly built them, and the population was simply replaced. Pay attention to the strange statistics of casualties. Official figures grow with each year of recalculation. Initially, they spoke of 300,000. Now they speak of 1 million. But if you look at the demographic gaps, a much larger number of people are missing. Where did they go? Let's move on. The Crimean War. We are told that Russia clashed with a coalition of Britain, France, and Turkey. But why would the world's greatest powers send their enormous fleets into the closed Black Sea to besiege a single city, Sevastopol, for years? The official version about control over the straits does not withstand criticism. Such a concentration of forces and resources for one point on the map is absurd from a military perspective, unless the goal was entirely different. Look at the bastions of Sevastopol before its destruction. These are cyclopean structures carved into the rock, with underground communications that could not be built with a pickaxe and shovel under enemy fire. Sevastopol, like many other star fortresses around the world, was an object of ancient infrastructure, an energy hub, a logistical center. We don't know exactly, but we know that the coalition relentlessly wiped it off the face of the earth with maniacal persistence. They bombed it not to capture it, but to destroy it, to level it to the ground, to turn antiquity into rubble. And pay attention to the soldiers' uniforms. French, British, Sardinians, they all look identical, as if dressed from the same warehouse, a standardized invasion army. And against whom? Against similar armies in similar uniforms. This looks like a fixed match where two armies destroy an ancient city and at the same time dispose of the surplus population of their own countries in senseless, bloody assaults. Now look at the most tragic and mysterious conflict, the Paraguayan War, 1864. Tiny Paraguay against giants, Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. The outcome of this war is monstrous. Up to 90% of Paraguay's male population perished. 90%. This is not a war. This is genocide. This is a total cleansing of the territory to zero. Why? What was Paraguay hiding? Historians say that Paraguay was an incredibly developed, self-sufficient country with railroads and telegraphs built without British loans. It was a country system that fell outside the control of London's financial clans. But there is another version. Paraguay was a refuge. There, deep within the continent, enclaves of that very previous civilization were preserved, attempting to survive after a global catastrophe. A coalition of neighbors armed and financed from outside simply came and physically eliminated all carriers of the old genotype. Women and children were left to mix blood and create a new, obedient people, but the men who remembered freedom and technology were cut down at the root. All of this leads us to a chilling thought. The 19th century was a time when some third force was operating on Earth, a force that coordinated strikes, supplied weapons, and rewrote history in real time. We see traces of weapons used that surpass in power everything that officially existed at that time. We see melted forts in America and Europe. We see cities buried under several feet of clay. And on top of this clay, soldiers in bright uniforms marched, finishing off those who survived the cataclysm. The asymmetry of these wars was not in tactics. It was in the fact that the civilized world was fighting against ruins, against fragments of a great past. They were cleansing the territory for us, for a new civilization that should remember nothing that existed before the mid-19th century. And to hide the traces of this crime, they invented the terms industrialization, colonial wars, and civil conflicts. But you cannot deceive mathematics. The demographic collapses of that time scream that the Earth's population decreased not by percentages, but by orders of magnitude. And now we will try to understand exactly how this happened and what technical means were used for it. Let's set aside emotions and turn to dry, ruthless logistics. Any military expert will tell you that war is primarily about supply. For an army of 100,000 people to operate effectively in foreign territory,
It needs tons of food, fodder for horses, gunpowder, lead, and medicine daily. Official history claims that in the mid-19th century, all of this was delivered on creaking carts over muddy dirt roads or by sailing ships dependent on the wind. But if we overlay maps of military operations onto maps of actual terrain possibility of that time, we run into an insoluble contradiction. The scale of operations in China, India, and America is technically impossible with the level of transport development that we are told about in school. Take, for example, the so-called colonial conquests. We are told that the British, French, and Dutch sailed to wild shores, planted a flag, and within a couple of years erected magnificent cities there, with parliaments, train stations, universities, and banks. Look at the architecture of Bombay.